this is Kat. Today's video ended up being about 3 times longer than I had planned, and it's certainly too long to put up in one hit. So I'm going to break it down to a couple of parts. I hope you enjoy it. Look forward to seeing you. So the next round is another 5 double crochets, plus so it's just, and they are going into, this is where I was getting confused earlier, they are going into the stitch that is at the top of the double crochets, toggle double crochets from round 2. So you're not going to try and get them into the slip stitch from round 3. You want to go, so it's a bit like the same as we did in the corners in the chain stitches for round 1, is to just go in underneath that slip stitch into the top of the stitch of round 2. So changing colours, and I'm going to find a blue. So this is different yarn than I was using on the patch for the blanket, but it's a lot easier to demonstrate with this yarn. It's also easier for me to do the square first to make sure I'm understanding what the pattern's got and what the pattern is before trying to demonstrate it. So I'm going with a slightly darker blue, so I've got the silver in the middle, yellow, and this time I'm going to again turn it around. I want to not have the threads when I weave them in all in one spot. So I'm moving around the square again, and remembering we're going in underneath the slip stitch here, and make sure the yarn's the right way in my hand. I'm going to pull that yarn through, and we need to do 3 chain stitches for the next round. Now, because we are slip stitching back into a chain, I'm definitely using the marker so that I can get back into that easily when I come to close the round. So 3rd chain, and the chains are standing in for the first double crochet of the next round, or of round 4. So we've got 1 double crochet, we need to do another 4 double crochet into this space, or into this stitch. And I'm going to catch the tail end of this thread into those stitches as much as I can, just so that it's not going to move or stay put through the rest of the round. So going in once, make sure that's getting caught, through 2, and then back in, round, through 2 more of those, through 2 twice, 1 more, twice. Now we're going to go straight from this point into the 2 chain space from your treble crochet in the previous round, so in round 3. So there's not going to be any chain stitches, we're not slip stitching into anything, we're just going from there with a double crochet straight into the next chain space. And we're going to do 5 double crochet, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm going to chain 2 for the corner of this, and then we're going to do another 5 double crochet into the same chain space. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, let's double check that, yep, and 5. And again the same, we don't use any chain stitches here, we just go straight in to the next double crochet, which will be in underneath the slip stitch from round 4, sorry, yes, round 3. Losing count here, so straight into the underneath the slip stitch from round 3 to the top of the stitch of the toggle 5 together of round 2, and I've lost my yarn over, so we'll go back in. That's 1, and we'll do 4 more into there. So pretty much all of the groups of stitches on this pattern work in lots of 5. So except for your treble crochets that grouped in 4s, but all of the double crochets are in groups of 5. That's 4, 5. Okay, so we're going to continue doing that all the way around. So the next one, so into the space between your treble crochets is going to be 2 sets of 5 double crochet stitches with 2 chains in between, and then with no chains between separating the stitches from the corner, go directly into the top of the toggle 5 together stitch from round 2. I will remember the round numbers in my head. I'm going to keep going round, and I will meet you when we're about to join this round together. Okay, I've just got one more double crochet to do into this space before joining it the round to the beginning, and I'm going to slip stitch directly into the top of this chain from the row below that's standing in as a double treble. So because it's into a chain space and we've left the stitch marker there, I'm just going to use the stitch marker so that my hook can follow it through. Get rid of the stitch marker, and then I can slip stitch that one together. Now again, if you want to change colours, do that now. I'm actually staying with this colour. The next round is single crochet only, and it's going to crochet, or mostly single crochet. There is a couple throw-in stitches in there. So with a single crochet, rather than change colour here, and it's mostly going to get covered up by the following round, I'm going to stay with the blue. And to get to the next one, we're just going to do a single chain. So I am just going to get rid of this fluff on the yarn. So I'm just going to trim it off rather than try and pull it out. Pulling it out risks completely destroying or breaking the wool. This one is wool, so there's a high likelihood that if I try to just pull that, it's going to come out completely. So chain 1, and then we're going to single crochet into all 5 of the stitches below in the fan. Then we're going to, when we get to the in between the fans on the sides, we're going to do a spike stitch into this space in between the posts of the treble stitches in round 3. So I'll show you how to do that when we get here. For here, we're going to just going to continue with this one. We're going to do a single crochet into the same stitch that this chain's coming from, because a single chain doesn't count as a stitch. So I'm going to put the stitch marker here, because that's where it will need to join when we get back, and do a single crochet into that stitch. So that's the first stitch of the round, and we should have 4 more. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, just double checking that. Single crochet, which will be the top of the fan on this first side fan. So I'm going to call them side fans and corner fans, just so I can differentiate between the two. So 4 and 5. And this is where we've got a trick stitch thrown in. It's not really that tricky, it's just that you've got to keep your eye out for it. So we're going to go from here, before we go into these stitches of the next fan with single crochet, we're going to do a spike stitch to get hold of this treble section below and anchor it into the top or into these stitches. So there's not going to be any big space. At the moment there's a large space there, and that stitch section's kind of, you know, it's a bit wonky. It's not wonky, it just doesn't quite sit right. So you're going to do a double crochet, so yarn over, and in between the space in between the posts, so not into the stitches, tops of the stitches themselves, go through that space, bring your yarn through and pull it up. And you do need to pull it up quite a bit, otherwise you're going to end up with your stitch pulling your work into that spot. It will be really tight there. So pull the stitch up, pull through 2, pull through 2. So that's that spike stitch. And then we still need to make sure that when we're going back to these single crochets for the corner fans, that you don't miss this stitch here, because now that you've got an extra stitch going in front of it in between these two fans, so it's in between that stitch and that stitch, it's really easy to miss this stitch here because it's now covered up. So just go, make sure you pull that to the side, go into the top of that stitch and just single crochet, and then a single crochet in each of the 4 remaining stitches until we get to the space. So now we're at the space, we need to do 3 single crochet into the 2 chain space. If you only do 2, this corner will buckle over and it won't be flat. So I'll show you what happens with 2. So I'm just going to quickly do 2 and then go into the next stitch as well, so that you can see, hopefully see, how that corner is starting to bend over and up. So without the extra chain stitch, single crochet in this space, the corner won't stay flat, so it does need the 3. So 2, 3. Again, because you've added an extra stitch, make sure when you get to your next fan that you don't miss the first stitch when you're single crocheting or doing the single crochet into it. So again, across the top of this fan, a single crochet in each of the 5 double crochet, And before we move on to the next fan, we're going to do another spike stitch. So another double crochet in between the two posts of the treble crochet from the row before. So pull it up, make sure that that's not too tight. Through two, and then just make sure you move it aside so that you don't miss the top of that double crochet. And it's the same all the way around. So I'll just pull this out. So from here, a single crochet into every double crochet from the round before. When you get to the stitch at the end of your side fan, so once you've single crocheted into that fifth stitch, before going into the corner fans, you need to do a double crochet that goes in between the middle of this cluster of treble crochets. So you'll have two treble crochet on each side, and you're going between the posts, double crochet, then making sure you don't miss this stitch here, single crochet into the tops of the stitch for the fan, and in each corner space 3 single crochet. If you want to continue that around, I'm going to keep going, and I will meet you back when we get to the end of this round. Welcome back. I'm almost at the end of this single crochet round, so we're on round 5. I have one more single crochet to do in the last double crochet from the fan below, so put that in, single crochet. Don't forget that even though we're right at the point that we want to join, we still need to do this double crochet spike stitch through the treble crochet fan from the, or cluster from the round below, the round underneath. So we do treble crochet in between the posts, making sure you've got 2 posts or 2 stitches on each side of that, making sure it's not too tight, then over, that one off, over, and then slip stitch into the single crochet that you did at the beginning of the round. Slip stitch that in there. Again, move the stitch marker. At this point I'm going to change colour. If you're not changing colour, from here you would chain 3 for the next round. You don't need to slip stitch in anywhere else, you just go straight from this point here. Because I'm changing colour, I'm just going to cut that off. Pull that one through, and we'll have a look at this square. So the next round is the final round of the original pattern, and it is essentially, it's treble crochet all the way around the outside of the square, except when you get to the spike stitch, the double crochet spike stitch that you did into the treble crochet. It's double crochet. If I said treble, I will fix that. Said my terminology getting mixed up again. It will be a double crochet round with a treble crochet that is a front post treble crochet going into the top of this spike stitch. So we'll show you that, and I'll do that a couple of times because it's not a difficult stitch, it's just a little bit fiddly. So it's not hard to do the stitch, it just looks difficult, I guess. So I'm going to change now to the cream colour or tan, which is the outside or the border colour for my blanket. So if we go up here, I'll show you this. We're onto this border around here, so row 6, and you can see here where we've got this front post treble crochet going into the double crochet from the round before. And I think it's pretty cool. It makes it look like almost like a lock that's locking this part of the pattern to this border, which I think is a really nice effect. So we'll get the yarn, and again, so I don't have all of my stitches having to be woven into the same space, I'm going to turn around and start from the next side. So find my hook is a little bit tangled up in yarn. So those who haven't watched yesterday's video and are wondering what on earth is happening with this hook, I've built up the handle with cotton twine. I have permanent nerve damage in both of my hands, and I cannot hold on to a hook at all. I have no grip power whatsoever in either hand, and without the grip added to the hook, I can't pull the hook through. I can't maneuver the hook at all. So it's just there to make sure so that I can keep crocheting, essentially. And I've just found that whilst you can buy hooks that have the grip on them already, and finding one that you're comfortable holding can be difficult. They can get expensive when you're trying to buy a whole set of hooks that have grips, whereas doing it yourself, a ball of cotton twine costs about $2. It's cheap, and I can do 3 or 4 hooks depending on how I'm building them up with a single ball of twine. So I find it a very cost-effective, I guess, way of being able to make sure that I can keep working and doing my crochet. So to start this round, I'm actually not going to start yet, because the other thing that I forgot to mention is that these double crochet are into the back loop only. So I'm not sure how clear this is going to show, get some of this fluff off, show up on the camera, but they go into the back loop, and it leaves the front loop to leave a really nice little edge or a border around this inner square. So by the back loop only, what I mean is you've got, if you look at the top of your stitches, you have a loop at the front and a loop at the back. So when we're doing this round, we're going into this loop here rather than through the top of the stitch where we've got both loops on the hook. So because we are going through the back loop only, when I attach the yarn for the final round on, I'm not going to go through both stitches or both loops for the stitch. I'm going to go in to the back loop of the stitch, pull that through, and then I need 3 chain to get to the next round. So 1, 2, I'm going to put a stitch marker in, just I find it a lot easier to deal with those. You can use yarn if you want to prefer to use yarn. You don't have to use a plastic stitch marker. There's a whole range of different stitch markers available on the market as well. 3rd chain to turn this into a double crochet, so that this chain stitch is standing in for the double crochet, and then we're going to double crochet in the back loop, so over, through into the back loop of all of the stitches in the fan. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to catch up my tail in this as well. So it's going to be behind, it's not going to be visible from the front of this square. So double crochet, I think I split the yarn on that one. Double crochet in, and again, so into the back loop only, through, bring that forward. And you don't want to pull tight on this, because when you're only going into one loop, if you pull tight, you will stretch that loop out and it won't spring back and sit in. So if we look again at the pattern or the square I've already done, you can see if I pull on that, I'm going to do one up the top so you can see the light coming through. If you pull on that, you can see the spaces through the stitch. If on any one stitch you pull too tight, you're going to stretch that loop out and it's not going to spring back in. And for this square, that we don't want that effect on this square. We just want to make sure all we're essentially doing is trying to keep this nice border created by the front loops. So it helps to yarn over first. So yarn over, through the back and through. Again through the back loop only. I usually do back loop work on a single crochet row rather than a double crochet row, which is why I keep trying to do a single crochet instead. So we've got, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're up to doing the front post treble crochet into the double crochet from below. So to do this, you want to yarn over twice. Now be careful doing this that you don't go to the bottom of this treble crochet, or this, so the spike down here. You want to make sure that you're going in at the top of the stitch. So go in underneath that, the top with the 2 loops, and when you come back in with your hook, you want to make sure you're not catching the next stitch along as well. So you go underneath and you need to make sure that you haven't caught any of the next stitch along. Yarn over and then just slide that one through, bring it up. You don't want to bring this up too far because it's a treble. The treble gives it the length that it will need to catch up to the height of the row that we're working on. So through 2 again, just carefully there, and through 2. So you will end up with essentially you're catching that double crochet stitch at the level of these single crochets from round 5. If you go down to the bottom of the spike, you're going to be working then into round 4, which is not what we want here. The next thing you need to be aware of is when you've done your front post treble crochet, is the next stitch needs to go into the top of the single crochet on here, and it's easy to miss the first single crochet because it's partially hidden by this front post stitch. So to make sure you don't miss the next stitch along, look at the back of the work and you should have a stitch that's visible behind the front post treble crochet, and then you need to make sure that you go into the back of the loop of the stitch immediately following and catch that one, and you can see that from the back of your work. I will do that. So if you miss it, so I'll just pretend I haven't seen it and I've missed that entirely. If you just go from the front of your work, okay, well that's the next loop that you can see easily, and go into that one, you're going to be short a stitch on this row. But if you look at the back of the work, you will also see that there's 2 stitches here without a stitch in it, and we only need the one for this front post treble crochet. So I'll go back to there, back through. So just be aware of that as you're working around. Otherwise, when we get to the next row, you're going to decrease. The length of your rows won't be right. It will start to get tight. So through and keep going to the corners. So we're going back to the single back loop only crochet, or single crochet into the back loop only. You know that feeling you get when you think something's not quite right with this, but you can't quite see or don't notice exactly what it is? Well, I noticed as I got up to about here that I'd accidentally switched from doing double crochets to single crochets. So I'm going to come back to this point because we're not doing single crochets into anywhere. and I'm going to show you what needs to be done on these corners again, because it's actually not the same thing as I showed you for the single crochets. So doing double crochets in the back loop only across your work, except for where you do a front post treble crochet into the one double crochet below. When we get to the corners, we go 1 double crochet into the first corner stitch, so there are 3 corner stitches here. Into the second corner stitch, we're going to do 2 double crochet, so 1 and 2, then chain 2, 1, 2 for the corner, and then back into the same stitch that we just worked in, into the back loop, another 2 double crochet, and in the third stitch of the corner, 1 double crochet. That looks so much better. So I'm sorry, I do make mistakes regularly, even more mistakes it appears whilst I'm trying to film myself doing anything, which, if you watch yesterday's video, which was the re-edited now is uploaded of yesterday's video, and not only will you see a lot of mistakes that I make and bloopers and tongue twisters and everything else in the video, but if you had seen the original video, it looked good until I uploaded it, and I had some storage space issues at the time on my phone, and I could only save it in a fairly low resolution, and it just destroyed all of the editing on the video. When I went to add the text, or when you came to where the text was, it was blurry and it went in and out of focus. It was like watching, if you've ever used Photoshop and the blur icon or the blur tool on Photoshop at its highest setting, and it literally blurred all the text every time my hands moved. So it was pretty awful. Okay, so we've crocheted back across the top of this corner, and we're now back at the double crochet spike stitch, and behind the stitch we have to do a front post treble crochet, so we loop over twice, or yarn over twice, in through the top of that stitch. And as I said before, it's exactly the same process as before, making sure you don't catch this back stitch here, or this back piece of yarn here, because that's part of the next stitch. You just want to be behind the post, catch that through, and now pull through 2, pull through 2, pull through 2, then, okay, sorry, back again. So we were at making sure that we've only skipped the stitch behind this treble crochet in the front post of the double crochet below, and we get the back loop of the next stitch along without missing it, and it's a double crochet, so that when you look at the back of your work, you can see from the back where, because it's a different color, that you've got this stitch in underneath the top of this stitch here, and you've caught the next stitch along, so you're fine to keep moving. If you look at the back of your work and you find, let me just go, if you're just working along in semi-automation mode, which at 2 o'clock in the morning often happens, and there are 2 stitches behind here, you've got to go back, make sure you catch this next stitch. And there's nothing wrong with turning your work around as you're working to make sure that your stitches are where they need to be. So we'll catch that one in. Catch that one. Okay. So I'm actually going to try clipping this back to where I originally went through the round with you. If it doesn't work, then we're going to keep doing exactly the same thing across the rest of the round. So double crochet into the back loop only of all of the stitches for the fans. When you hit the double crochet spike stitch into the treble crochet below, do a front post treble crochet. That will go in and catch that stitch up behind the top of the stitch. And in the corners, you're going to do in the first stitch a double crochet, two double crochet into the second stitch, the middle stitch, chain two double crochet back into that middle stitch, both in the back loop only, and then a double crochet into the third stitch of the corner, and then you're back onto the fans on the side. I'm going to finish this and I will meet you back here at the end of the round.